we both, it was almost 40 years ago
It was 40 years ago.
that we met.
That was in the 1980s.
1985, you came to
85,
Vancouver.
yes, I remember. I went to
And
Vancouver.
the talk was on eco-obstetrics.
And
yes, we went to a hospital, children's hospital.
I've forgotten that, yes.
Yeah,
because
and there were about 300 people there, but there wasn't one obstetrician, not one.
Yeah, that's a lot, yes. Yes, because in 1979, I had published a book called in French, Genèse de l'homme écologique. Genesis of an ecological human being. In other words, how to develop the respect for the Mother Earth. So at that time, I was using the term, I've forgotten now, eco-obstetrics.
That's right, yes. That's right.
Obstetrics dominated by this question, how to develop the respect for Mother Earth. Thank you for...
And then in 2004, we met in Budapest. And Ina May Gaskin was there, and Elizabeth Geisel, and you and I.
And who?
And you and I.
Yes, yes. So that was in 2004. Yes.
So
what are your
long history?
Yes. What are your links with Hungary?
With?
Your links. What are your connections with Hungary?
Oh, I was born in Budapest.
You were born. That's what I wanted to hear. You were born in Budapest.
Yeah, I left in 1956. And lived in Canada and became a psychotherapist.
Yes, I know that. So you speak Magyar as well. You speak Hungarian.
Oh, I do. Yes.
So it's good that you helped me to remember all these details.
Yeah.
40 years, more than 40 years. We met 40 years ago.
Well, I'll tell you, I read your new book. I didn't read it in Hungarian. I read it in English.
Yeah.
And I was very impressed. I think it's a great book.
Which one?
The one about will humanity survive medicine?
Yes. That the book that translated. So it's a book dated originally in 2015. It's always important to remember, to explain, or to help people to remember when was a book published.
Yes.
Because the evolution of our way of thinking is so fast, and the scientific advances are so fast that we need when was it written?
A book is a footprint. That's where you were. A book is just a memory, just a footprint. Yeah. And who knows where you are walking now? One of the questions I wanted to ask is, what is most exciting for you now? But before I ask that, I'll tell you a couple of things that your book reminded me of. Most impressed I was by what you call the fetus ejection reflex.
Yes.
Because suddenly it explains so much in my own world, in my own practice, let alone orgasm, sexual orgasm, let alone when you're talking about losing neocortical control, perhaps that's what it is that people now, especially with the renaissance of psychedelic therapy, people are talking about ego loss or ego death. Most likely in psychedelic, in LSD, mushrooms, in all the psychedelic realm, there is an experience where people feel they die and then get reborn.
Yeah.
As if you get crucified and then you're resurrected.
Yeah.
And that experience is very fleeting. Even if you have ingested a lot of LSD, if you want it, or if there are people around who speak to you, you get close, like as if you get close to an orgasm, you get close to dying, but it fizzles out. You don't go there. You can fake it, but it's not real.
Yeah, yes. Yeah.
And so it seems to me that that fetal ejection reflex is there in the background, in our psyche, from birth to death.
Yes, you know, from in my point of view, it's a very important topic you have to introduce. And I must say that if I've used the term fetus ejection reflex, it's because I also use the term sperm ejection reflex, milk ejection reflex.
Yeah, right.
To explain that in all episodes, all aspects of our reproductive life, giving birth, making love, breastfeeding, there are always two phases. There is always a first phase, rather passive, rather calm, and so on, so on. And suddenly, something powerful with an ejection reflex. So it can be milk ejection reflex, sperm ejection reflex, fetal ejection reflex. It's always the same scenario. And what the subjective experience associated with this mechanical event, ejection, it's mechanical, the subjective, it's always access to transcendence, another reality that than space and time reality. And it is the reason for one of my books called originally The Functions of the Orgasm. And the subtitle was in English, The Highways to Transcendence. The highways to transcendence. In French, les autoroutes de la transcendance. So there are highways to transcendence. There are physiological processes involved in reproduction. But since the domination of nature by our ancestors about 10,000 years ago, what you call the Neolithic Revolution, domestication of plants, agriculture, domestication of animals, animal husbandry, domestication of human beings, domestication of human beings. Since that time, there have been ways to have access to the transcendence that have been indicated, authorized by the cultural milieu. For example, you can have access to transcendence by prayer, some kind of music, things like that, starving. But there are ways that to have access to transcendence that are not culturally acceptable, that are associated with guilt. It's, yes, it's the physiological access, ways to access to transcendence. And so it's acceptable in some milieu, for example, to have access with prayer, it's a way, or psychedelic drugs, or many starving, and so on. That's acceptable by the cultural milieu, but there are artificial ways accepted. But the high ways to transform on the physiological ways, physiological reflex, meditation, and so on, are associated with the guilt. What is significant in all languages, the nerves and the arteries that go to the genital organs means guilt.
Yes, yes. So God had one of these orgasms when Adam and Eve were ejected from paradise. And why were they ejected? Because they were guilty.
Yeah, guilt.
Yeah.
The word in English for the nerves going to the genitals, the translation of honteux, the nerve honteux. Oh, what is the word in English for the nerves and arteries that go to the genitals? It's a it means a word which means guilt.
I don't know.
Come to my mind now.
I don't know what you're referring to.
I'm referring to the nerves and arteries that go to the genital organs. In all languages, they mean guilt. There's a word that means honteux. In French, it's honteux. And suddenly, I have something in my mind, a word that does not come, probably because I'm age 92. Sometimes the word that's not coming, that the word for nerve honteux in English, or you know that, but it's typical. You
I don't know. Can I change the topic?
Yeah, but it was a very good way to start.
Yeah, thank you.
To realize
we can
that
come
we
back
have
to
been
it.
domesticated, we have been under the control of the cultural milieu for 10,000 of years.
Yeah.
And if you talk about childbirth, it's also a turning point of childbirth. I have somebody close to me who's trying to find the translation of nerf honteux and artère honteuse. It's a word I know perfectly well. You know, it means guilty.
I know, happens to me too.
It's a synonymous for guilty. Yes. But it's good to remember that, to know that, because the vocabulary is incredibly important.
Yes, absolutely.
Our way of thinking. So can you find so the answer will come quite soon.
Okay. In the meanwhile, I was thinking, by the way, today is Mother's Day. So it's interesting, we are talking about women having to reach, surrender would be the word, not will. There are psychoanalysts who have said,
just a minute. It's prudental nerves. Prudental arteries. So in English, when you refer officially in anatomical book about the nerves going to the penis, to the vulva, to the genitals, they are the prudental nerves. Shame. Right. That I could not find the word, although I know this word quite well. So let's go on. But I'm pleased to have.
Okay.
Can I ask you a question? How old are you now?
I'm in my 82nd.
Oh, you are so young, yes. I'm 10 years older than you.
Right. It is shocking, I would imagine, for many women to read that it's easiest to surrender when you're alone. Now, when I watch somebody, when I am with someone who is in an altered state of consciousness, And I do that a lot. I help people to have experiences under LSD, say. I don't think it would be good for them to be alone. However, it's very important, for example, that I don't speak to them, that I don't trigger their neocortex. If I just hold their hand when they want me to hold their hand, things go much better. I'm wondering if it's so categorical from your book. If I were a woman, I would get scared that from now on, I have to give birth alone and women have to give birth alone. I would prefer,
I
and
understand your question.
what you think, that only people who the woman loves, only people who the woman has connection with should be around.
Yes, I understand your questions. Yeah, I understand. We understand.
Very few, but no speech, no words. The words immediately stop surrender. Yes. But a loving touch can allow surrender. It can encourage surrender.
So I'd like to comment on what you said from the beginning. First, you speak about altered state of consciousness. I would never use the term altered state of consciousness. According to the phase of our life we are in, you are in a special state of consciousness. When in the daily life, when we communicate with Zoom, we are in a state of consciousness with an activated neocortex, state of consciousness. When we sleep, we are in another state of consciousness. When we have a fetus ejection reflex, because I have to speak of a man, we are in another state of consciousness. It's not altered. It's one of the physical states of consciousness. So the point of departure is to understand the physiological state of consciousness. And in particular, what is very difficult, it's incredibly difficult. What you explain are the difficulties, but it's normal that there are difficulties to understand what's happening during the birth process, because we have to recall that before the domination of nature by our ancestors, before agriculture, animal husbandry, domination of nature, before the domination also of our lifestyle by the cultural milieu, women used to isolate to give birth. That you say until, we might say recently, 10,000 years ago. So during thousands and thousands, 10,000 years, women used to isolate to give birth, reducing neocortical control and so on and so on. So it's obvious that after 10,000 of years of socialized birth, the turning point was birth started to be socialized 10,000 years ago. It means that somebody could be there, advent of midwifery, but also transmission from generation to generation of perinatal beliefs and rituals. For example, when baby is born, you have to cut the cord, that old ritual. Baby often in the hand of somebody else than the mother. They say the colostrum is not good, so that's a beginning of many aspects, renewed aspects, different according to the culture, but always domination of nature, birth became socialized. So after 10,000 of years, it's not overnight that we can desocialize birth. So it's impossible to, but sometimes we can go into this direction, because now people imagine that they cannot, to give birth, you need somebody. Look at the vocabulary once more. What are the keywords when you read books, texts about childbirth? The keywords are helping, guiding, coaching, among people promoting what they call natural childbirth. I don't know what it means, natural childbirth, but among these people, they use coaching. You need a coach. You know the famous American book, coaching.
Husband coach child.
Pardon?
Husband coach.
I mean, it was the book called Husband Coach Childbirth. Let me remember. Bradley, yes. Bradley was a guru of natural childbirth, has a deep misunderstanding of birth physiology. Absolutely. Husband, coach, childbirth. To give birth, you need a coach. You need somebody who knows, somebody who can guide you. You know, that's a dominant way of thinking. So it means that particularly among people, groups who promote natural childbirth, those who have not understood anything to birth physiology, it's incredibly difficult to recall that perhaps what we have to do is gradually, it cannot be in a century, gradually, we must try to desocialize childbirth. Today, people want me to talk about medicalized childbirth. I don't want to talk about that. It's just an ultimate phase of the socialized birth. So how to start? It's not to say women, you should be alone. It's not that. I would not, but it's to say, however, even modern women, even after 10,000 of years of socialized birth, occasionally they can give birth easily and quickly.
Yes.
In particular, in some situation. An example that I know, it's a woman who can give birth in a small, dark room with a comfortable in terms of temperature and nobody around apart from an experienced mother figure. She can be called a midwife, a doula, sitting in a corner, not looking at the woman, never, and doing something that tends to reduce the levels of adrenaline. Knitting, for example, knitting is very important behavior, repetitive task, reducing the level of adrenaline. So the point is not to say you should be alone to give birth. It's unacceptable. After 10,000 of socialized birth, it will need time, but to understand birth physiology. And we have to go toward that instead of constantly introducing somebody new. You know, now there are more and more people. There are births with 10 people around. What we have to do is not talking about the father, the mother, is how can we, to a certain extent, desocialize birth? That when we understand birth physiology, when we understand the concept of neocortical control, when we understand the solution that nature found to make the birth possible easy among humans, it's a reduction of neocortical control. It's like that for many physiological functions, like the sense of smell. If you drink a glass of wine, your sense of smell is more acute, reduce neocortical control. It's the same for a woman in labor. If she reduces neocortical control, it's easier. So that's the point. The point today is to explain, to assimilate what people don't want to do, the concept of neocortical control. Explain what it means. Not to use images. I would never talk about surrender. I want people to understand reduce neocortical control, what it means. That's all. Just that. Just that, that's all.
I get it.
But it's very difficult. It will take centuries to understand that finally, when a woman is giving birth, it's counterproductive to try to help her. What we can do is to protect her against neocortical stimulation. She needs protection. It's another vocabulary, another way of thinking. It's not saying should be alone. It's understanding.
Okay, two things come to mind. One is Krishnamurti once was at dinner and Laura Huxley was present, and Laura Huxley praised Krishnamurti. to the dinner guests how much he helped so many people. And Krishnamurti piped up, said, "Never on purpose, madame, I hope. In my profession, to actually help on purpose
To help on,
to help on purpose
on
is
purpose.
actually counterproductive.
Oh, yes.
Helping never helps. Now, one of your countrymen, Jacques Rancière, I don't know if you know,
Jacques,
Rancière, he wrote a book called The Ignorant Schoolmaster,
I
in
don't know
which he talked about around 1818, there was a man, a Frenchman, Jacques Otto, who taught Belgian children French without speaking Belgian. And so he realized, and Rancière makes the point, that teachers, when they teach, they actually make children stupid. So here is a book, and I'll teach you what's in it, suggests to the child that the child is too stupid to understand by himself or herself that they need a teacher. So interesting that already around 1818, there were Frenchmen who said that children don't need teachers. Now you are saying women don't need men, they don't even need midwives. So it must be a core French attitude to realize time and time again that perhaps the only proper function of the will is to will not to will, and especially not, as you say, coaching. It assumes that the other knows, and it denies the truth that every woman, if a woman knows anything on some level, she must know how to give birth. And then, we wouldn't exist as a species if they didn't know.
yes. So you mentioned,
what business does anybody have to know better?
yes.
So we don't need teachers, we don't need, we just have to go. The Buddha said when he was dying, that what are you crying about? You don't need me. Go within, be a lamp unto yourself. Everything I said, I found out by going deep within. Well, that's what you are saying. It's very Buddha-like.
So you mentioned references. I might provide references as well. I mentioned one reference, still older than those you have introduced, is from a bestseller written many thousand years ago. You heard about this bestseller. It's called Genesis. It's called the First Testament. And if you read carefully the first pages, you'll read in a negative way the consumption of the fruit of the tree of knowledge. But the important point that people have not noticed until now, on the same page, they say now women are condemned to have difficult birth. In French, they say painful birth. They translate different ways. So this is a very old reference.
Yeah, it's all there.
Yes, it means, and because you were talking about people, children, and so on, I'll just tell you a story. That recently I gave a lecture for a group called Aquatic Ape Theory, AAT, Aquatic Ape Theory. And my lecture had been preceded 3 months ago in the same series by another lecture. And the guy who spoke in this first preliminary lecture said, "Don't lose your time with experts." There are people that perhaps can teach you more than experts. And at the beginning of the list were children. So I use that for my own lecture. Because it's a group promoting the concept of aquatic ape theory, while I promote the concept of marine chimpanzee concept. Why we should be called marine chimpanzees rather than aquatic apes. So I said, to talk about that, I had a conversation with my friend Luan, a nice 12-year-old boy. And all my lecture was a fiction, a conversation with the 12-year-old boy. The reasons to replace aquatic by marine, which is the reason to replace ape by chimpanzee, and the reasons to replace theory by concept. So forget the detail. I want to repeat this, lecture, but it's a little bit the same way, you know, the same way. We don't express ourselves the same way. There are things that are more easily understood at a certain age rather than other age. And we have to, I said that because you mentioned children. They have a way of thinking. And I think when you are a non-Algerian, in the 90s, when you were 90s in my case, we can easily communicate with children.
Absolutely.
We share some common way of thinking. So,
absolutely.
Well, thank you. You inspired me to say that now.
Thank you, Michel, for talking with me. And it's a privilege. And I hope you enjoy Budapest.
Yes,
I haven't been there for a while because of COVID and traveling difficulties, but I sure miss the people. I sure miss the food. I sure miss the atmosphere. So you're very lucky to be in Agnes Gerib's care.
Thank you, and she's happy to see you and me
I hope I see
time.
you in another decade. We'll meet again.
Yes, in another decade. If you come to Budapest in another decade, let me know.